My name is Chaim, and I'm an old Jew from Odessa, back when it was part of the old world, full of salt in the air and stories in every corner. I've seen 78 winters now, and let me tell you, life has a way of piling on like stones in a riverbed. But today, I want to share a tale that's not just any story. It's one that hit me hard when I first heard it, and it might just do the same for you. It's about a man named Israel, a simple fellow from Tel Aviv, and how he faced the heaviest load imaginable. Picture this: Israel sits alone at his Shabbat table, the one his wife Sarah set so carefully all those years. The candles should be flickering with warmth, the challah bread waiting to be blessed. But tonight, the house feels empty as a forgotten well. Sarah's gone, left a note that says she's had enough of the silence between them. The wine glass slips from his hand, shatters on the floor, red like blood from an old wound. Why smile now? Why even try? Israel's hands shake as he stares at the single candle still burning, its flame dancing like it's mocking him. In that moment, the weight of it all crashes down. Lost job, empty home, a heart too heavy for any prayer. But something stirs. He reaches for the old Talmud his father gave him years ago, pages yellowed like autumn leaves. On the margin, in faded ink, joy isn't in the world around you, it's the spark you carry inside. Israel wipes his eyes, but the candle gutters low, almost out. Then a knock at the door. Aaron, his old neighbor, stands there, with eyes shadowed by his own losses. "Come, join our minyan tomorrow," Aaron says, but his voice cracks, like he knows the darkness too well. Israel nods, confused. Why reach out now when everything's crumbling? He thinks back to his grandfather in Odessa, telling tales of pogroms and hard times, yet always ending with a quiet laugh over tea. That night, as the flame steadies, Israel wonders, how does a man find light when the night presses in from all sides? He blows out the candle, but the question burns brighter. By morning, he's made up his mind. He'll go to his father in Jerusalem, seek the old wisdom that held their family through worse storms. Little does he know, that road will lead him straight into the heart of his own shadows, where the real fight for happiness begins. As the sun rose over Tel Aviv that next morning, Israel packed a small bag, just enough for the bus ride to Jerusalem, and whispered the Modani prayer under his breath, thanking the day for another chance, even if his heart felt like lead. Chaim here, remember? I've ridden those dusty roads myself, back when visiting family meant crossing borders of worry. Israel stepped off the bus in the old city, the air thick with the scent of fresh pita and distant prayers from the western wall. His first move was simple: head straight to the little synagogue his father frequented, the one with stone walls that echoed like voices from the Torah. He joined the minyan, there slipping into the back row among men like him, tired but holding on. The prayers flowed, and for a moment, as they recited the blessings, Israel felt a warmth creep in, like sunlight through a cracked window. This was it, he thought, the path back to joy. After, he found his father, old Isaac, waiting outside with a nod and a hug that smelled of sage and thyme. "Son," Isaac said, his voice gravelly from years in the heat, "you look like you've carried the world on your back." They walked to a quiet cafe, and Israel poured out his troubles. The job gone, Sarah's note, the shattered glass. Isaac listened, then shared a Talmudic line. Even in the darkest exile, the Shabbat candle reminds us light is eternal. It felt like a key turning in a lock. Israel called Sarah that afternoon, his words tumbling out with new hope. "I'm learning, truly," he said. She didn't hang up right away. There was a pause, a softening. By evening, as they lit the Shabbat candles together over the phone, Israel believed it. The rituals, the words, they would mend everything. The weight lifted, just a bit. He even smiled at a passing stranger on the street. But, oh friends, that's where the false dawn fools us most. As night fell, Isaac pulled him aside in their modest home, the walls lined with faded photos from Odessa days. "There's something I haven't told you," his father confessed, eyes downcast. "The illness, it wasn't passing. Doctors said it was deep-rooted, like a weed in the soul." Israel froze, the warmth from the minyan evaporating like morning dew. How could this be? The prayers, the wisdom, they were supposed to protect, not reveal more cracks. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just his marriage or job. It was the whole family thread, the stories Isaac had woven to keep them strong. Israel pressed his father. "But the Talmud says—" Isaac shook his head. "Words are birds, son. They fly, but the cage of truth holds us." That night, doubt clawed back in. Israel wandered the streets of Jerusalem, the city lights mocking his inner dark. He cornered an old friend of his father's, a quiet man named David, at the market the next day. "Tell me the secret," Israel begged. "How do we hold joy when life crushes?" David paused, selling olives with steady hands. "It's not about pushing away the heavy, it's dancing with it, step by painful step." It rang true, a spark. Israel rushed back, determined. He'd organize a small gathering, a makeshift Shabbat for Isaac and a few neighbors. Invitations went out, simple, heartfelt. The table groaned under challah, wine, and stories. As they sang the blessings, Isaac's face lit up, sharing a tale from their Odessa roots. How, amid the hunger of old times, a single joke around the table turned despair to defiance. Laughter rippled. Israel joined in, feeling the false victory swell. Sarah even texted, "Sounds healing. Maybe." He'd done it. The joy was returning, pieced together like broken bread. But victory, my friends, often hides its thorns. In the midst of the songs, Isaac coughed, a deep rattle that silenced the room. Israel pushed forward, reciting a prayer louder, willing the light to stay. They ended with hands clasped in a circle, and for a heartbeat, peace reigned. Yet as guests left, Isaac pulled Israel close. "You fought well tonight," he whispered, "but the real shadow, it's been in you all along." The words hung like smoke. Israel stepped out into the cool night, the high from the gathering crashing into a void. He'd won a moment, but at what cost? His father's health teetered, Sarah's reply felt distant, and now this hint of a deeper wound, his own unspoken fears. Despair wrapped around him like a shroud. He slumped against a wall near the old city gates, staring at the stars that seemed indifferent. Was joy just a fleeting guest, leaving him emptier than before? No plan left, no light in sight. Everything he'd built that day crumbled to dust. And in that lowest pit, as tears came unbidden, Israel wondered if there was any way out at all. Israel leaned against that ancient wall in Jerusalem's shadow, the night air cool against his tear-streaked face, feeling like the very stones were pressing down on him. Chaim speaking again. "I've known that kind of dark, my friends, when the world shrinks to just your regrets, and hope feels like a distant memory from someone else's life." Everything Israel had tried, the prayers, the gathering, the reaching out, had slipped through his fingers like sand. His father Isaac fading, Sarah's silence deafening, and now this gnawing sense that he'd built walls around his own heart, brick by silent brick. He walked aimlessly through the narrow alleys, past shuttered shops and the faint glow of a late-night study group poring over Torah. Exhaustion pulled at him, whispering to just give up, let the weight win. Why fight when joy seemed reserved for the young or the lucky? He slumped onto a bench near the old city gates, burying his head in his hands. Memories flooded in, unbidden. His grandfather from Odessa, sitting by the window during blackouts, telling stories of survival with a twinkle in his eye. "The candle doesn't wait for light, boy," he'd say. "You strike the match yourself, even if your hands shake." That old phrase echoed now, connecting the dots Israel had ignored. The shattered glass at home, his unspoken fears about the job loss, the way he'd shut Sarah out instead of sharing the load. It wasn't the losses crushing him, the illness, the goodbye note. No, the true heaviness was his own silence, the fear of vulnerability that turned every burden into a mountain. A spark ignited in that pit of despair. What if joy wasn't something to chase outside, but a flame to kindle within, no matter the storm? I beg you, don't ignore this, dear listeners. It's the quiet truth that changes everything. Israel stood, resolve hardening like clay in the sun. He'd go back to Sarah, not with excuses or rituals, but with the raw truth of his heart. Risk it all. One last desperate bid to light that inner candle. The paradox hit him as dawn broke. The heaviest loads weren't the tragedies themselves, but the words we swallow, letting them fester like unhealed wounds. With the first light painting the hills gold, Israel caught the earliest bus back to Tel Aviv, his mind racing through what he'd say. The ride felt eternal, every bump a reminder of the chasm he'd let grow. He arrived at their old apartment as the sun climbed, knocking softly on the door Sarah had closed behind her. She opened it, eyes red-rimmed, arms crossed like a shield. "What now, Israel? More promises you can't keep?" Her voice cracked, sharp as the wine shards he'd left behind. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of her lavender soap mixing with the staleness of absence. Tension hung thick. She paced, listing grievances, the late nights at a job that vanished, his withdrawal into silence, the Shabbat tables that turned cold. Israel stumbled at first, words catching like thorns. "I thought I was protecting us," he said, voice trembling, "by holding it in, like Father taught, strong and silent." But then the epiphany surged. He knelt by the table where it all began, pulling out the Talmud from his bag. "Listen, Sarah, this book, our traditions, they're not shields. They're mirrors. I've been afraid to show you my dark, thinking it'd dim your light. But the real fear, it's me, hiding from you, from myself." He poured it out then, the terror of failure, the boy from Odessa roots who'd seen his parents scrape by, yet smile over simple bread. Sarah stopped pacing, tears welling. "And I hid too," she admitted, sinking beside him. "Pushed you away because I couldn't bear the weight alone." The room shifted, their shared pain weaving a fragile bridge. Just as words flowed freer than ever, Israel's phone buzzed. Isaac, weak but clear. "The doctors, stabilized. That minyan you started, the prayers, they reached deeper than medicine." Shock rippled through him. The gathering's echo had saved more than a moment. Sarah took his hand, and together they lit 2 candles on the table, not for Shabbat, but for them. The flames steadied, casting warmth on faces softened by truth. Victory, hard won, bloomed in that space. No grand fix, but a turning point where fear yielded to openness. The confrontation ended not in shouts, but in quiet sobs turning to held breaths, the antagonists of silence and isolation finally broken. A week later, dust from the storm settling like fine ash, Israel and Sarah sat by Isaac's bedside in the Jerusalem hospital, sharing slices of challah smuggled in against the rules. The old man managed a grin, his color returning bit by bit, the rattle in his chest quieter now. "You two, like kids again," Isaac murmured, squeezing Israel's hand. Life hadn't erased the scars. The job hunt dragged, finances pinched like always. But something fundamental had shifted. Sarah's presence beside him felt like an anchor, not a chain. Over the next month, Israel found himself back at the synagogue, not just praying, but leading a small circle for men like him, fellows in their later years, weighed by losses, seeking that inner spark. He'd share snippets from the Talmud, not as lessons, but as lifelines. How our ancestors danced at weddings even after exiles, turning heaviness into song. The group grew, voices overlapping in stories of resilience, and Israel marveled at his own change. He spoke freely now, vulnerabilities laid bare without shame. Happiness wasn't a constant sun, it was the daily choice to strike that match, even on cloudy days. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Jerusalem's golden stones, Israel stood on a hilltop with Sarah, her hand warm in his. The city sprawled below, a tapestry of ancient walls and modern lights, much like their life, enduring, layered with both shadow and glow. He thought of the house in the tent, that old metaphor for building stability amid wandering. The paradox lingered. Joy thrives not despite the heavy, but because we embrace it, letting it forge us stronger. In that sunset's embrace, Israel felt the weight lighten, not gone, but shared, transformed into a quiet, abiding peace. In the quiet hush of their Tel Aviv home, a few days after the hospital visit, Israel sat with Sarah on the worn couch, her head resting on his shoulder as the afternoon light filtered through lace curtains. Isaac was home now, mending slowly with broth and rest, his stories flowing freer than before. The air smelled of fresh-baked challah cooling on the counter, a small ritual they'd started together. Israel wrapped an arm around her, the warmth of her presence chasing away the last echoes of that long night. Finally, he thought, breathing deep, this nightmare's over. We've stood firm, just like our ancestors through the ages. The world felt steady again, the heavy clouds parting to reveal a fragile blue sky. But in that calm, as Sarah dozed lightly, Israel's gaze fell on an old note she'd tucked into a drawer, the one from their early days, scribbled during a minor quarrel years back. A sudden chill ran through him, like a draft from an open window. He read it again. Simple words of love, unmet because he'd buried his worries instead of sharing them. And then it struck, sharp as a hidden thorn. The matter wasn't in the outer losses at all, not the job that vanished, not Sarah's departure, not even Isaac's illness that shook the family roots. Nor was it in the fractures he'd tried so hard to mend with prayers and gatherings. No, the true enemy, the one that had unraveled his life thread by thread, was his own shadow. That deep-seated fear of vulnerability, the silent armor he'd worn like a second skin. It reflected back as every hardship, the empty Shabbat table, the doctor's grim words, the miles of unspoken pain between him and Sarah. All those events, the betrayals and breakthroughs, now reshaped. In his mind's eye, the minyan's warmth? It wasn't just community. It was his first crack in the wall, letting light seep through. The gathering's laughter, a fleeting win against the isolation he'd built himself. And the victories, small as they were, came not from fighting the world, but from facing that inner dread, accepting the pain as a teacher rather than a foe. Jews had known this for centuries, whispering it over Talmud pages and Sabbath candles. The debt we carry is a rope we weave ourselves, knot by knot, from the silences we choose. Israel sat frozen, the realization a quiet earthquake. How many years had he danced around this truth, blaming fate instead of the mirror? And in that moment, dear friends, Israel's story stopped being just one man's journey through the storms of life. It became a mirror for us all, reflecting the hidden battles we wage in our own hearts. What if the most dangerous foe we fight our whole lives isn't the circumstances that weigh us down or the people who slip away, but that which we refuse to see in ourselves, the fears we nurture in the quiet? But what came next for Israel wasn't the true core of his tale, my friends. Far more important was peeling back why it all unfolded that way, the hidden currents pulling at him and at all of us, like invisible threads in the weave of life. Have you ever paused in your own quiet moments, wondering why, when the burdens press hardest, we build higher walls instead of reaching out? Why we swallow the words that could lighten the load, turning solitude into a cage? That's the key unlocking this whole story. the one that turns a personal struggle into a universal whisper. Right now, in this gentle sharing, like we're sitting together over a warm cup of tea, steam rising soft in the air, I'll reveal what so many of us overlook even after years of living. It's not some grand secret locked in ancient scrolls, but a simple truth our Jewish forebears carried through exiles and trials, passed down at Sabbath tables and in the hush of prayer. Listen closely now, the rhythm of it building like a heartbeat in the night. The great secret to staying happy when life grows heavy isn't in sidestepping the stones on the path. No, it's in learning to dance with them, kindling that steady inner flame no storm can snuff. We all fall into loops of fear, repeating the same silent retreats, the same buried hurts, until one day we choose differently. Gratitude as our first breath, like the Modani prayer that thanks the dawn before the eyes even open. Israel's path showed it clear. His victories weren't from rituals alone, but from cracking open that armored heart, letting vulnerability breathe. And just like him, each of us circles in our own patterns, letting heaviness define us until we see the light waiting within. Joy blooms not from pushing back the dark, but from accepting it as the soil where strength takes root. And what familiar loop are you tracing in your own? Weighted days, dear listener? What small step might it take to strike that match and light your inner candle? Ponder this a while. We unpack such life-shifting stories here often, the kind that quietly reshape how we walk through our years. To catch the next one that might spark your own turning point, you know what to do.